Right now, somewhere in your body, a hormone is quietly building. It rises in your stomach. It travels to your brain. It whispers one word over and over until you finally listen. You call it hunger, but the real answer to where that feeling came from is far stranger than a rumbling stomach. Your hunger is not new. It is not even human, not really. It is a signal older than language, older than fire, older than the first tool ever chipped from stone. Somewhere, millions of years ago, a creature that was not quite you and not quite anything else felt that same ache for the very first time. And everything that followed, every migration, every hunt, every fire lit against the dark, traces back to that single moment of need. What did that first hunger actually feel like? Nobody knows for certain. But the science of what your body does today gives us a window into what theirs did too. Picture an early hominin, roughly 2 million years ago, moving across the grasslands of East Africa. Not tall, not strong compared to the predators nearby, slow on 2 legs compared to 4. This creature had no claws worth mentioning, no fangs, no fur thick enough to matter. What it had instead was a brain that was growing, fast, generation after generation. And a growing brain is an expensive brain. Your brain today burns about 20% of your total energy, just sitting there, thinking. For an animal with a body this small, that is an enormous cost. So how did a barely armed, slow-moving primate afford to grow the most energy-hungry organ in the animal kingdom? The answer is hunger itself, not the feeling, the pressure. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades studying what he calls the cooking hypothesis. The idea that learning to cook food unlocked calories that raw food simply could not provide. Cooked meat and cooked tubers are dramatically easier to digest. Your gut spends less energy breaking them down, which means more energy is left over for something else to use. And your brain, always hungry, was first in line to take it. There is a name for this trade-off in anthropology. Researchers call it the expensive tissue hypothesis. The idea is simple, even if the biology behind it is not. A body only has so much energy to spend. If one organ starts demanding more, another organ usually has to give something up. In most animals, that trade happens with the gut. A large gut is expensive too, full of muscle and bacteria and constant digestive work. Somewhere in your ancestry, the gut began shrinking slightly, generation after generation, while the brain grew larger to take its place. A smaller gut meant less raw plant matter could be processed efficiently. It also meant your ancestors needed denser, richer food to make up the difference. Food like meat, food like fat, food that was harder to find and worth fighting for. This is the quiet bargain hiding underneath every meal you have ever eaten. Somewhere back in time, your ancestors traded a bigger stomach for a bigger mind. And hunger was the debt collector that came calling every single day to make sure the trade was worth it. Before fire, though, there was just the hunger. Raw, constant, and dangerous to ignore. Imagine that pressure building in a creature with no fire yet, no permanent home, no stored food, no refrigerator down the hall. Every single day was a negotiation with an empty stomach. Skip too many meals and you die. Wander too far chasing a meal, and something bigger might eat you first. This is the tightrope your ancestors walked. Literally sometimes along riverbanks and cliff edges, hunting and gathering and hoping. So what did they actually eat when that first hunger hit? Mostly plants, roots, tubers, seeds, whatever fruit was in season. Insects, when they could find them, because insects are shockingly rich in protein and fat. And meat, when they could get it, though not in the way you might picture. Early hominins were scavengers as much as hunters, following lions and hyenas, waiting for the carcass to be abandoned, then rushing in with sharpened stones to crack open bones for the marrow inside. Marrow that other predators could not reach, a secret pocket of fat hidden in plain sight. That single behavior, cracking bone for marrow, may be one of the earliest examples of humans outsmarting hunger instead of just outrunning it. Think about how that scene must have actually looked. A pride of lions finishes feeding, bellies full, wandering off to rest in whatever shade they can find. Vultures start circling overhead, a signal visible for miles. And somewhere in the grass, a small group of hominins watches, waits, and calculates a risk that would terrify almost any other primate. They move in fast. They know they have minutes, not hours, before hyenas arrive to fight them for the scraps. Fear and hunger pulling in opposite directions, and hunger winning, because hunger always had the better argument. What they were after was not the meat. Larger predators had already claimed that. What they wanted was hidden inside the leg bones the lions left behind. Bones too thick and dense for a lion's jaw to crack open easily. A sharpened stone, swung with the right amount of force, could do what a lion's teeth could not. Inside was marrow, an oily, calorie-dense substance that may have done more to fuel the growing hominin brain than the meat itself ever did. A hidden pocket of energy, protected by bone, unlocked by a tool. This is one of the first recorded examples, written in fossil evidence and cut marks on ancient bones, of technology solving a problem that muscle alone never could. But scavenging only gets you so far. At some point, something changed. Hunting became deliberate, and one of the strangest, most human ways our ancestors solved the hunger problem had nothing to do with speed or strength at all. It had to do with patience. Researcher Louis Liebenberg spent years studying persistence hunters in the Kalahari Desert, communities who still hunt the ancient way today. The method sounds almost impossible on paper. A human being chases an animal, an antelope say, that is faster than any person could ever hope to be. But the hunter does not stop. Hour after hour, in the heat of the day, when the antelope has to slow down and pant and cool itself, the human keeps moving, slowly, steadily, sweating instead of panting, which turns out to be a huge advantage. Eventually, the animal collapses from exhaustion, and the hunter, who never sprinted once, simply walks up and finishes what the hunger demanded. This only works because of something strange about the human body that most people never think about. You sweat. Almost every other mammal cools itself by panting, which means it has to stop running to breathe properly. You do not have that limitation. Millions of sweat glands across your skin let you release heat while still moving at a steady pace, hour after hour, under a punishing sun that would eventually break almost any four-legged animal trying to outrun you. Add to that your long legs, your upright posture, and the springy tendons in your feet built almost like natural shock absorbers, and you start to see an animal built less for the sprint and more for the marathon. Not the fastest predator on the savannah, the most relentless one. Endurance, not speed. Patience, not power. That is how a soft, clawless, relatively weak primate became one of the most effective predators on the planet. Hunger did not make your ancestors stronger. It made them smarter about how to use the strength they had. And once meat, fat, and marrow entered the diet regularly, everything sped up. Brains grew larger. Social groups grew more complex, because hunting in packs meant sharing, and sharing meant trust, and trust meant something like the earliest form of cooperation. Hunger built more than muscle. It built society. Then came fire. Nobody can say the exact date humans tamed fire, but once it happened, the equation of hunger changed forever. Cooking softened tough plant fibers. It killed parasites hiding in raw meat. It unlocked calories that had been locked away in food for millions of years. Calories your ancestors' bodies could suddenly access all at once. Wrangham's research suggests this was not a small improvement. It may be the single biggest jump in caloric efficiency in the entire history of the human diet. Hunger, once satisfied only through relentless effort, could now be satisfied faster, with less physical cost. Consider what a single evening around a fire actually changed. Before cooking, chewing alone could take hours out of the day, jaw muscles working constantly just to break down tough raw fibers well enough to swallow them. Wrangham's work points out that some primates today, close relatives of yours, still spend nearly half their waking hours chewing raw plant matter just to extract enough calories to survive. Cooking collapsed that burden almost overnight, evolutionarily speaking. Meals that once took hours to consume could now take minutes. That freed up time did not disappear. It went somewhere, into tool making, into more elaborate hunting strategies, into simply talking to the person sitting next to you at the fire, which, over enough generations, may have helped build the very foundations of language and culture. A fire did something else too. It became the first safe place after dark. Predators feared it. Warmth radiated from it. And for the first time, your ancestors could sit still after sundown instead of huddling anxiously in the black, listening for footsteps. Hunger brought them to that fire in search of food, but the fire gave them something hunger never could. A pause. A moment of safety long enough to simply exist together, share a meal, and rest. But here is the strange part. As the hunger crisis eased, a different kind of hunger began to grow in its place. Your brain does not just crave calories. It craves the promise of calories. This is where the science gets personal, because it explains something happening in your body right now, today, in a world with grocery stores on every corner. In 1994, molecular biologist Jeffrey Friedman and his research team identified a hormone called leptin, produced by fat cells, that tells your brain how much energy you have stored. Low leptin, and your brain assumes famine is coming, even if your kitchen is fully stocked. It raises your appetite, it makes food smell better, taste better, matter more. It is the same ancient alarm system your ancestors relied on, still running inside you, still calibrated for a world of scarcity that mostly no longer exists. Your ancestors' brains never expected abundance. They were built by hundreds of thousands of years of feast and famine, evolved in an environment where the next meal was never guaranteed. That is the world your hunger response was designed for, not this one. Consider how strange your everyday environment would look to that early hominin. A hallway lined with brightly lit refrigerators, each one stocked with more food than an entire hunting band might find in a week. Shelves of dense, sugary, salty items designed quite deliberately by modern food scientists to hit the exact same pleasure centers your ancestors relied on to survive scarcity. Your ancient brain was never built to say no to abundance, because for nearly the entirety of human history, abundance was never really a problem worth solving. Scarcity was the only enemy anyone prepared for. So when you feel a craving hit at 11 at night, when the smell of something fried pulls you across a room, when an advertisement for food makes your mouth water before you have even decided to be hungry, you are not weak. You are ancient. That response is a hunter's brain, dropped into a world of infinite snacks, still running code written for the savannah. Isn't it strange that the very system built to keep your ancestors alive during scarcity might be the thing working against you during abundance? This is not a flaw in you. It is a mismatch between the environment your body expects and the environment you actually live in. Your ancestors' bodies stored fat efficiently because fat meant survival through a lean season. Today, the lean season rarely comes, but the storage instinct never got the memo. Even the foods you crave most tell this story: fat, sugar, salt. These were rare and precious in the ancient world, dense with the energy your ancestors desperately needed and could not always find. Your brain rewards you for eating them because, for nearly the entire span of human history, finding them meant you had won, at least for that day. Now they sit stacked on shelves, available in seconds. And your ancient reward system fires exactly the same way it always has, because it has no idea anything has changed. Think about that the next time you reach for something salty or sweet without even thinking about it. That is not an accident of willpower. That is a message from an ancestor you never met, still trying to keep you alive in a world that stopped being dangerous in quite the same way. And yet, some things never fully changed. You still eat with other people, most of the time, by choice, out of comfort. That instinct traces directly back to those early hunting groups, sharing meat around a fire, because a meal eaten together was safer, fairer, and more likely to keep the whole group alive. Your dinner table tonight is a much quieter, much safer echo of that same ancient circle. Sharing food was never simply generous. It was strategic. A single successful hunt could provide far more meat than one person or one family could eat before it spoiled. Sharing it with the wider group meant that when the roles reversed, when someone else's hunt succeeded and yours failed, you would eat too. This is sometimes called reciprocal exchange, and some researchers argue it may be one of the earliest forms of social insurance in human history, built entirely around the unpredictability of hunger. You did not know which day would be a good day, so you built a system where a good day for anyone became a good day for everyone. That instinct is still sitting quietly inside you. It is why splitting a meal with a friend still feels different, warmer somehow, than eating the exact same food alone. It is why cultures across the entire world, with almost no exceptions, treat the shared meal as one of the most important social rituals a person can take part in. Underneath the tablecloth and the small talk, something much older is still running. A survival strategy dressed up as dinner. You still feel a small wave of relief when you finally eat after being truly hungry. That relief is not just comfort. It is a very old reward, hardwired into a brain that once had every reason to fear the alternative. So what happened, really, when the first human felt hunger? It was not a small thing. It was not simply an uncomfortable feeling to be solved and forgotten. That hunger became the engine behind bigger brains, longer legs built for endurance, sharpened tools, controlled fire, shared meals, and eventually, complex cooperation between people who were once strangers. Every uniquely human trait you can name, language, culture, teamwork, art, was built on top of a species that had to figure out how to feed a brain too expensive for its own body. You are, quite literally, the descendant of the ones who solved that problem. Every ancestor who quit too soon, who wasn't patient enough during the hunt, who ignored the warning signs of a coming famine, they are not in your family tree. Only the ones who listened to hunger, who respected it, who used it as motivation instead of ignoring it, made it all the way down to you. Thousands of generations later, that same signal is still doing its job, even in a world it was never designed for. Farming eventually softened the worst of the scarcity, roughly 10,000 years ago, when humans began planting instead of only foraging. Granaries appeared. Stored grain meant a bad season no longer had to mean starvation. And yet even then, hunger did not disappear. It simply changed shape, tied now to harvests and seasons instead of a single day's hunt. The feeling in your stomach today is layered with all of it. The scavenger cracking bone for marrow. The runner chasing an antelope through midday heat. The first cook crouched by a fire, watching meat change color and texture into something softer, richer, easier to eat. The farmer watching the sky, waiting for rain. So the next time your stomach tightens and your focus sharpens, and food suddenly becomes the only thing you can think about, know that you are feeling something almost unchanged across 2 million years of human history. A signal built in a body that once had no guarantee of a next meal. A signal that pushed a slow, clawless primate to endure heat, chase animals for hours, crack bones for hidden fat, and eventually build fire, farms, and cities. Right now, somewhere in your body, a hormone is quietly building. It is the same one that built you,